Hi guys, Drew here. First, I want to apologize. I did not upload a video last Friday. While I had filmed one and edited it and had it ready to go, through my own error, it ended up being erased by accident. So it was about working with Ascended Masters, and I just took it as a sign that I didn't need to upload that video for some reason, even though I was a little upset about it, but whatever, stuff happens. So from now on, I'll be more careful, and I should be uploading every Friday. On with today's video. I believe it's number 17 in the Pagan Challenge prompts. It's about introducing your children to spirituality. And I've heard this question a lot about whether or not you would introduce your children to your path and how would you do so. And for me, this is something that I dealt with a long time ago. My oldest child is 20, well, just about, and out on her own. Our middle child is just turned 17, and our youngest will be 15 in like 2 weeks. So yeah, I answered this question a long time ago. And for anyone who might be struggling with it, I thought maybe I could help out. Firstly, there were a few things that influenced how I introduced my children to my spiritual path. The first being, neither my husband nor myself were raised in a religious family. So we were kind of free to choose for ourselves to what we were drawn to and where we went. And I feel like that's of fundamental importance. I've always looked at my children like little human beings. Yes, they're children, they need to be guided and looked after, but they are still people, and they will grow, and as they do so, they will develop into a real life person. Some people, my parents were from a generation that was dismissive of children. You know, you're to be seen and not heard kind of deal. You weren't a valid person until you grew up. And I just didn't agree with that train of thought. So I always felt like my children, while I should guide them and help shape them and hopefully make them into good people who are productive members of society, I should allow them to be people and to experience things and develop into who they develop into through their own free will. So while I exposed them, while we said to them, you know, this is our path and this is what we do, and exposed them to our practices, the whole time we were also telling them there are so many other paths. There are so many religions and spiritual paths, and while we may not personally understand or agree with them, they are just as valid, important, and treasured by the people who follow them as our path is for us. And we even try to give them introductions to other paths as much as we could. And, you know, we always said we're not experts on this, you know, but this path, you know, this is my understanding of what they believe and whatnot. And that way, if they were drawn to something, we could help them go that direction. Would I have been thrilled if they had latched onto my path? Of course, but it's not necessary. You don't have to follow my path to be a good person and to do good things in the world and have a good life. Another important influence in how I exposed my children to spirituality in general, and specifically my path, is geographical. We live in the eastern part of North Carolina, right on the beach. And while the place that we live right here is pretty interesting, you don't have to go far in any one direction to end up in areas that are set in their ways, maybe. The beach is a pretty open place because so many people come and go, and the areas directly surrounding the beach are a little more open, progressive, whatever you might want to say, accepting, because so many people come and go. But you don't have to go far before, you know, this purple-haired freaky lady is going to get weird looks, at the very least, not even to mention my spiritual path. There are 4 little towns right here nestled together where I live, that not one of them will take you more than 5 minutes to drive through. Yet each one has at least one, often 2 or more churches. You cannot walk down the street without tripping over a church. And while some of these churches and their parishioners are lovely people, some of them are a bit on the fire and brimstone side. Many of them are kind of on the fire and brimstone side. And I knew this. And so when I was exposing my children to my path, I always made sure that they understood that there were people where we live that believe very differently than us. And that those people, unfortunately, do not have an accurate understanding of what it is that I believe and what it is that I do. And those people have certain beliefs that lead them to think that what I do is wrong and it's bad, and they don't like it. And I try to express this to them always on an age-appropriate level. But, you know, I don't mind if you go around talking about the fact that your mother is a shaman and that she does witchcraft, but this is what you might run into. So you might not want to run around telling everybody. Unfortunately for my children and where we live, they both decided early in grade school that they were atheist. They didn't believe anything. Even though we exposed them to so many things, they didn't believe any of it. And they weren't shy about letting other people know. And through grade school and middle school, they came into problems because of that. It's not like they ran around telling everybody they were atheists, but because of where I live, God comes up. Kids talk about God, and they, you know, God is good and blah, blah, blah. And particularly my son was like, no, God doesn't exist. So that was a whole can of worms there. At this point, I don't think that my children are strictly atheist anymore. They don't believe in any particular religious path, and they don't believe in their gods. I'm not sure about my stepson. I'm not sure. But my daughter and my son have both had too many experiences that are otherworldly to not believe in something. I just don't think that they've fully figured out what. My daughter is currently, for the second time, delving into witchcraft and whatnot. I'm feeding her herbs and giving her suggestions on, you know, YouTubers to watch or books to read. And she's always had a collection of books and witchy tools because she did kind of get into it when she was younger. My son, on the other hand, just likes stones. He's not interested in working with herbs or, oh, hello, Sister Vulture. Sorry. There's a vulture flying around outside. At any rate, he's not really into spiritual paths per se. Like, she is definitely more drawn to that kind of thing. I'm kind of getting off topic. The point is, there may be many things you take into account when talking to your children about your spiritual path. We did practice ritual with our children when they were little. Again, my daughter would do it with me today, but she doesn't even live here anymore. So that would have to be a special thing set up. But my son is not interested in it at this point. But when they were little, we would do very simplistic ritual. And each child would have a task. For instance, one might light the candles and one might light the incense and one might say the blessing. Or there were times when they would each have part of a blessing to say. Didn't really do spells with my kids when they were little, just ritual. And there would typically be a reason behind it so that they had something to latch onto, something to understand. It was a gratitude ritual. Or one of my favorites was a beloved pet of ours. We had a chinchilla and she died, and we did a ritual for her, and it was beautiful and it was very moving. My little boy was so sweet. But again, that was something that is ingrained in them, a very deep, beautiful experience of, you know, expressing our love for this creature that we lost. Part of the family we lost. Another one of my favorites that we would do with the kids sometimes is we would all sit down, we'd do the simple ritual part, you know, get all the candles lit, whatever. And then we would go around and each of us would say one thing that we really genuinely liked about the other people in the circle, the rest of our family, you know. And I absolutely loved that because it was unprompted. The kids didn't know it was coming when we would do it, because we wouldn't say, okay, this is, you know, what we're going to do. I would just, once we're in ritual, say, okay, now we're going to do this. And the things that would come out of their mouths were many times very surprising. I didn't expect them to say such a lovely thing about their sibling or me and their father. And it really gave you insight into where they were coming from and what they thought about everybody. And those rituals were always really poignant and special to me. I like to get them involved in the Sabbats. The main two, I mean, we would, and Mabon do, you know, gratitude, but the main two that we really got into with them were Yule and Ostara. And at Yule, we added to it since, which is just me doing it now. But when they were little, we would take pine cones and fill them up with peanut butter and roll them in birdseed and put them out for the birds. And then we would also take ribbon and we would write something that we were grateful for or something that we wanted and tie it to the tree. That was something we did at my parents' house. My mom always had a huge Christmas tree. I don't really do big Christmas trees. My tree is... I'll show you it at the end, my tree. I love my tree, whatever. It's not a traditional Christmas tree at all. At Ostara, we would hollow out eggs and we'd make a pretty good sized little hole, maybe like the size of my pinky tip or smaller. And we'd sit with the kids, we'd rinse them out, then we'd sit with the kids and we'd fill them with birdseed. And we'd have all of us would whisper something in it, something we were grateful for, something we wished for, what have you. And then quickly we'd cover it with, I'd put some Mod Podge on some thin paper. I had this brown paper and I would put it over the eggs. And then we'd go out to the backyard and we'd just like have an egg fight, not necessarily with each other, but we'd just like throw them out toward the woods on the ground and they'd explode and the birdseed go everywhere. And our wishes went away. Now, it wasn't so much about what it was we were doing. Typically, I liked it to be something that somehow gave, you know, like the birdseed gave to the birds, that kind of thing. But it was just to get us all together. And while we were doing what we were doing, I would explain the Sabbat. I would give about what the Sabbat was, what it meant, and why it was important to me and why I celebrated. That was the part that really mattered. So yeah, I think it's just about being age appropriate and getting them involved, exposing them in a way that they can participate and that it can be a bonding experience between you, because performing ritual with your children can be really beautiful. And I highly recommend it to anybody who has children and wants to create a deeper bond. Even if, like I said, my children, my son for sure is not fully on board. Like, he doesn't care about ritual and stuff like that anymore, but we still have that to go back to, that we did those things together. And they were significant and they were special. And yeah, so that's my thoughts and my feelings and my experiences with exposing your children to your craft, to your practice. If any of you out there watching have your own experiences, I would love to hear about them. So leave it in the comments. And until next time, much love and gratitude. So yeah, this is my Yule tree. My little baby dead tree. And it has little LED lights on it. When you plug it in, they light up. And for me, that's perfect.